So I've been hard at work on my big Halloween project for the past few weeks. That's what that is. I didn't want to spoil anything, but I also didn't want to take it off the dress form, so I just put a sheet on it and I was like, hey, that's spooky. She's haunting the narrative. But I wanted to take a little break from working on it because it's starting to make me a little crazy, and I still have quite a bit left to do. So I was like, hey, how about I start an entirely different project? Also, if I don't, I will have one video for this entire month of October. So I just wanted to do a kind of quick, smaller project in the middle of this big project that I've been working on for a while. And I made this plushy pumpkin a few weeks ago off camera. You might remember it from the intro of my lacy gothic dress video. And ever since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about making a pumpkin purse. Because y'all know I love a kitschy purse. But one of the best things about pumpkins is all of the opportunities they hold, and all of the wonderful things they can become. I'm of course referring to jack-o'-lanterns, and all of the different faces you can carve into your gourd to give it a little personality. I can't possibly choose just one, so I'm also going to make a set of interchangeable facial features that can be mixed and matched to suit the current mood. Let's get into it. I really wanted to throw the pumpkin at the camera just then, but that would have been a bad idea. Let's get into it. I started out by taking a picture of the paper pattern piece I drafted for the plushy pumpkin and then digitizing it in Adobe Illustrator. I wanted to make some modifications to the shape of the pumpkin for the purse, a little taller, a little rounder, less pronounced ridges, and overall a little bit smaller. I made a few variations of the pattern piece, then printed them out and made some quick mock-ups. I had to futz around with the pattern a bit more, but I finally ended up with something that I liked. So I did several versions of that pattern, altering the exact angle of the curve to try and get the shape right, and I did a couple mock-ups at half scale to get an idea of the shape, and I finally ended up with this guy. The fabric that I used for this is making it very like modern farmhouse shabby chic vibes, but it's got a good shape. I've gone ahead and printed out a full size of the pattern. I'm also going to be making this into a full pattern that'll be up on Patreon. If you're interested in that, I'll have the link for that below. But now it's time to go ahead and start cutting out my fabric, and I think I'm going to go ahead and start with the lining. I've got some cotton pillowcases. These are actually left over from my Herbie Cat video I did a couple weeks ago. I think this is a pretty good like inside of a pumpkin color. I've got this very orange velvet left over from something. So it's time to start cutting things out. I cut out 16 banana-shaped pieces and then sewed them together 2 at a time along the outer curve to make 8 pumpkin segments. I clipped and pressed the seam allowances, then sewed the segments together to make a full pumpkin shape. Okay, so the lining's all put together, and you might be thinking to yourself, how is this purse gonna open? And that's definitely something that I thought about and planned for before starting this. 100 definitely. So I want this purse to have like a little lid at the top that flips up, kind of like the way you would open a pumpkin to carve it, where you like cut around the stem. So in order to do that, I've gone ahead and made a modified pattern piece that's the full segment shape, not just half and cut on the fold, and then took a bite out of one end, so that'll make the hole in the top. I'm gonna just leave the lining as is and then just cut it down once I have the outer layer and the inner lining made. I think that'll give me the best ability to kind of zhuzh it and fold it over and make sure I get a clean edge there. So I cut out all my velvet pieces and started sewing them up. I put the walking foot on my machine to keep the velvet from slipping and sliding against each other, but even then some of my panels ended up a little bit misaligned. It wasn't too bad, I just needed to trim the top edge down a bit, and the whole assembly process went pretty alright, all things considered. I wanted to add a felt interlining to add a little bit more structure, so I trimmed the seam allowances off my pattern piece and cut out 16 more panels, this time in felt. I assembled them by butting the edges against each other and sewing them together with a zigzag stitch, hence why I didn't need the seam allowance. I started tacking the velvet and felt layers together, going through the seams in the velvet so that none of the stitches would be visible from the outside, but I had to make an addition in between those 2 layers before closing that gap completely. I wanted the face pieces to go on with magnets, so I needed to add some in between the velvet and the felt. To keep them in place without any visible stitching, I made little packets out of scrap fabric to hold the magnets, and then stitched those little raviolis into the velvet. I made some quick little fabric loops with D-rings to attach the strap to later, and then sandwiched those between the outer and lining layers. With the base done, I could start working on the lid of the purse. The simplest, most logical thing to do would be to take the little end bit of the existing pattern piece that I cut off for the base and use that for the lid, following the same process I had just did. So what I did instead was spend almost 2 hours working out a new pattern that basically makes a very, very small 1 1/4 circle skirt. I cut 8 pizza slice shapes that were all slightly bigger than 1/8 of a circle, so when they were all sewn together into the full pie, the circle had a wavy edge that theoretically would align with the segments on the base. I sewed a cotton lining, a felt interlining, and a velvet outer layer following this pattern. I sewed the velvet and cotton layers together, right sides facing, turned that right side out, and crammed the felt interlining in between them. With the interlining pinned in place, I twisted together some jewelry wire and fed that in between the layers, all along the rim to reinforce the scalloped edge. This was when I realized that not only did the wavy edge not line up with the ridges on the base, but the whole lid itself was too big and looked more like a hat than a lid. Instead of realizing that my plan was not going to work and remaking it the way I should have from the start, I doubled down and tried to make it work. I pinched down parts of the wire ring to match the size of the bag opening, and then scrunched the fabric of the lid around the smaller ring. I stuffed fabric scraps in to try and make it less wrinkled, but she was still looking pretty scrunkly. She's a little lumpy, but she's one of those heirloom pumpkins, you know? Those are more expensive, so that's what I'm doing. On purpose. I also made a quick little yo-yo to patch over the hole in the center of the lining because, of course, these cursed pattern pieces didn't meet in the middle. I covered the hole in the outer layer with the stem, which was just a simple rectangle sewn into a tube with one end folded into a sort of 3-pointed star and then sewn shut. I stuffed the stem with fabric scraps and then slip-stitched it onto the lid. Then the lid could be attached to the base with a blanket stitch, opposite from the side of the base with the magnets. That basically finished off the purse, but I had a few accoutrements that I wanted to add. There's all the magnetic face pieces, of course, but before I started those, I wanted to make a little coin purse to hold them in when they're not in use. I thought a little leaf would be super cute hanging off the side of the bag, so I found a photo of a pumpkin leaf online and traced that to make a pattern. I cut out 2 leaf shapes from some scrap green linen and drew some veins onto one piece to embroider over. I definitely should have done the embroidery before cutting the pieces out, so I could have used an embroidery hoop, but stitching with the fabric loose worked just fine. After finishing the embroidery, I did a zigzag stitch around the edges of both pieces to prevent fraying, which was super fun to do on such a wavy, organic shape. Then I sewed together the 2 leaf shapes with a zipper running along half of the outer edge. I also made a quick little ribbon loop with a lobster clasp so the leaf pouch could be clipped to the purse. I sandwiched that between the 2 fabric layers so it would look like the stem coming out of the leaf. Okay, so I've got the little leaf pouch done, and it's so cute. It's a little bit wonky with the zipper, and the zipper especially made it lose some of the detail. You can see on the pattern piece there's some more detail to that, a few more artistic lumps and bumps, and then this is a little bit simpler, but I think it gets the idea across. And it's very cute. So the last thing I need to do for the base purse is put a clasp on it. I wasn't really sure what kind of clasp I should get because like a lidded purse like this, you need kind of like a special clasp. I thought about using these jewelry toggle clasps. I thought about using these jewelry toggle clasps that I have that are leaf shaped, but I felt like it would be kind of awkward having a toggle clasp on this kind of a bag. And also they're silver. And I'm aware my hardware doesn't match. The D-rings on this are brass. The clasp on the leaf bag is gold. The chain I'm going to be using is kind of brassy bronze. I don't know. I don't mind the mixing of the gold and the brass, but the silver I think would have been a little bit too much. So I went to the craft store to see what sort of thing I could find, and I ended up getting, and this might be a little crazy, I ended up getting a little wooden box. And it's got this little clasp here. I'm going to remove the clasp off of this, and it's got little screw holes that I think would make it very easy to sew onto this. And I think this style of clasp will work very nicely for this bag. So I'm going to remove the clasp off the box, sew that onto the bag, and then the last thing I need to do is make all of the face pieces. For the face pieces, I made some paper templates to work out the proportions and figure out what shapes I wanted. Then I cut those out of some dark brown felt, 2 layers for each piece. I did a blanket stitch in matching embroidery floss to attach the 2 layers with a neodymium magnet in each little packet. I want to make a quick note here, if you plan on making anything with magnets, to be careful when handling them and avoid getting them near electronics and things like credit cards. They can wipe data off of computers, phones, and cards with a mag stripe. I have personally demagnetized a hotel room key card, locking myself out 3 times in a row before realizing what was going on. According to some sources online, this is less of an issue nowadays with modern technology, but better safe than sorry, just a thing to watch out for. The very last step was to attach the strap. I had randomly found this half-full reel of jack chain at the thrift store a few weeks ago, which was perfect for this. I cut a piece long enough to use as a crossbody strap, attached it to the D-rings, and that finished off the purse. Do I look like the Headless Horseman? Is it working? I have no idea. The purse is done, and she's very cute. I love it very much. She is a little lumpy. She's one of those artisanal gourds. Martha Stewart would go crazy for this. I really love all the little face pieces and all the different combinations I can do. The magnets stay on super well. You can't just like brush them off. You've got to like actually put some force to it. I think if I were walking through like a really crowded space and someone brushed against it, it might pull a piece off, but I would just never subject my pumpkin purse to such circumstances. So there are some things I would change. The clasp at the top doesn't do anything. It looks pretty. It's very cute, but it does not keep the bag closed. But also the lid doesn't really need a clasp to keep it closed. It just kind of stays shut. The lid is like the main issue I have. I don't know why I did it like this. It's so lumpy. I was trying to make it easier so I wouldn't have to cut out 16 small pieces of the velvet and sew them together. But in the end, it just got very wonky. It would be fairly easy to make another one. I still have more fabric. It's not going to be too difficult to remove this and replace it. I just don't want to do that right now, so she's a little lumpy bumpy. I really should have just used the pattern piece that I made for the body of the purse and like cut a chunk off and use that for the lid. For the pattern that I'm putting on Patreon, I will fix it so that that is the pattern piece to use. I'll include this one just to have it in case someone smarter than me can make it work. But that pattern should be up on Patreon by the time this video goes out, so if you're interested, that link will be below. Thank you to all of the patrons who support me and make these videos possible. All of your generosity is greatly appreciated, and an extra special thank you to the magnanimous Maelstroms tier. Thank you to Perfect Primrose and all my other patrons for supporting this channel. Quick little programming note right here at the end of the video. Normally I upload every other week on Fridays, so my next video would be going up on the 24th, which is the week before Halloween. But I've got my big Halloween project that I've been working on, and I want that to come out on Halloween, and I want to be able to spend as much time as possible and focus on that only. So if you are interested in seeing that Halloween project, subscribe and click whatever other buttons you're inclined to click. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!